Alrighty everybody, thank you all so much for tuning on in. Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that you need to know before you start investing. So before we begin, I want to pose the question to y'all. If you were starting a chicken farm, how would you run it? Would you make a plan that's flexible but easy enough to follow that allows for weird contingencies that may or may not happen? Or would you just go willy-nilly and see where things land? And then the second thing, would you buy so many chickens and so much land that you couldn't take care of it all? Or would you be a little bit rational with what you decide to buy and what you decide to take on? Then the third thing, obviously when you have the chickens, it takes time for them to hatch, and it also takes time after they've hatched for them to grow into full-blown chickens that you can make sandwiches out of. And it also takes time for hens to lay eggs. So then the fourth thing, let's say you're talking about hens and they're laying eggs. Well, even then, when you're collecting eggs and taking them to the market, you wouldn't want to put them all in a single basket. And then the last thing, just because you have a certain number of eggs that you think are going to hatch into little baby chicks, little baby chickens, that might not be the case. You wouldn't want to count the chickens before they hatch, just because things can happen along the way. And investing is very similar, and in the next section we'll talk about that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is making a plan and sticking to it. You want to make a plan that's easy enough to follow, that's flexible, but something that you can follow. And one way to do that is to make it automatic. So automatically investing a certain amount of money every 2 weeks or every month makes things a lot easier. You don't have to think about it. And then when you're making the plan, you got to consider the what if scenarios. What if your investment drops 10, 15, 20%? What if it goes up 10 or 15 or 20%? Are you going to change what you're investing in because now you're overexposed to stocks, and it's better to get back into real estate, precious metals, bonds, and stuff like that? You got to have a contingency plan for all the what if scenarios. So automating investing and planning for the what if scenarios are a good way to make your plan. Okay, so the second thing we're going to be talking about is not overextending yourself. And what that means is not putting every dollar you have into your investment, whether that's real estate. You don't want to buy the most expensive house you can afford, because in reality you can't afford it. There's going to be expenses that you run into that are unforeseen. Likewise with stocks, you don't want to put everything you have to invest all in all at once, because what if it goes down? It goes back to the first step, making the plan. You got to be smart and think, okay, well, maybe it's going to go up in value, maybe it's not. But having that little bit of extra cash on the side for flexibility, allows for you to invest in things that are a good deal later down the road, or in the case with real estate, it allows you to take care of any unforeseen expenses. So the third thing I want to talk to you all about is being patient. Just like with the chicken farm, the hens take time to lay eggs, and the baby chickens take time to grow into full-blown chickens that later get turned into chicken sandwiches. The same thing applies with investing. You got to be patient, and that's just the nature of it. In the compound interest video, we talked about how $1,000 can grow into $23,000 at 8% interest, compounded annually over 40 years. But that's 40 years, and it just takes time. You're not going to be a millionaire overnight. It takes time. You got to be diligent. You got to be patient. So the fourth thing I want to talk to you all about is diversifying. You want to make sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, like the chicken farm. Because if you were to take all those eggs to the market and try and cash them in, and the egg truck wrecks, or you're carrying it in the basket and you have all the eggs and you trip and fall and they all break, you're going to be out of luck. Luckily, you can diversify. So that means buying a mutual fund that has a whole bunch of stocks in it, so that if one tanks and the others do okay, you'll be okay. Same thing with bonds. You can buy a bond fund that has a whole bunch of bonds in it, so that if one guy defaults, you're going to be okay. The point is, you just don't want to have everything tied up in one single risky asset, because it could tank and you could be out of luck. So the fifth and final thing on the list, past performance doesn't guarantee future performance. What that means is just because a fund has done really, really well over the past 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, doesn't mean that it's going to do as well over the next year or 3 years or 5 years. It could do better, it could do worse. Going back to the chicken farm analogy, you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch. You know, you may think it's going to perform a certain way, and that's probably a good idea, but you know, it's not a guarantee. You may have a dozen eggs, but that doesn't mean you're going to have a dozen baby chickens in a month. So be cautious and don't fall into that trap. So, in summary, make a plan and stick to it. Do not overextend yourself. Be patient, diversify, and remember that past performance does not guarantee future performance. If you can do all those things, you're pretty well set to start investing. And in the next videos, we'll be talking about each asset and how they apply to the big plan that you're going to be making. So thank you so much for tuning on in, and I'll see you in the next video.